It's a seminar from the USC TCORS Tobacco Center of Regulatory Science. I'm actually really pleased to introduce Patricia Nez Henderson, our speaker today. She's Vice President of the Black Hills Center for American Indian Health. She's Navajo. She went to the University of Arizona undergraduate and then went on to Yale and trained in medicine, and also has an MPH from Yale. She has been involved in the tobacco issue related to the American Indians for a long time, and has recognized as a true national leader in this very challenging topic. Actually, I have to say that we got to be friends when we were serving on the Tobacco Products Scientific Advisory Committee, better known as TIPSAC, and she and I are among a small tribe of menthol report survivors. This is a group that met, I think, 10 times in 1 year to put together the menthol report, and it was certainly a bonding experience, culminating, I think, in our last night of work as a group where we worked till about 2 in the morning trying to have a report that we thought was as good as it could be before we presented it. She was really a major contributor in that effort, and I've noticed that already she has collaborations here with Tom, who has networked with everyone who told me. And actually this whole thing about how many degrees of separation you are from Tom Valenti. So, in any case, thanks for coming. You're so lucky that it rained while you were here. I mean, this doesn't happen for just everybody. Yeah, and we're planning on an informal presentation. So, thanks.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here on this beautiful day. I was just sharing a story about a time when my husband and I went to the Northwest Territory of Canada, and we brought in this crazy storm. Absolute temperatures fell down to minus 75. And this elderly woman says to me, Dr. Henderson, he's like, did you bless the earth when you first got off the plane? And I'm like, no. She's like, well, that's why you brought this temperature, this nasty weather. So I failed when Paradina picked me up at the airport. I failed to bless Los Angeles. Caused this chaotic moment for you guys. Sorry about that.
We need it.
So this is just something that we put together that I want to share with you. I'm not sure if I can, if it's possible to do this.
Is that fun?
Yeah.
Yeah, but is it lunch?
Oh dear. I need it a little bit technically challenged here.
What do you want to do?
There's a video that is a part of this. I'm not sure if it's able to upload it or not.
Andrew, you
Yep.
might be.
If it's not able to do that, then I can go without it. It's no problem.
He can do it. He can do it. You're on the spot, Andrew.
There it is.
So it's just a 2-minute video that I want you to see before I get started.
There it is.
There's supposed to be some. There it is.
Yateşe Patricia Nez Henderson Yinchke. Sırf anlinçta otuzoni başışçı. Çerçekeni daşınalı, aşçı daşıçı. Kutai sado amado ezeilinençi. My brother and I grew up in a home filled with lots of love and laughter. On the high deserts of the Navajo Nation, we spent our summer days climbing hills and diving into water troughs. I was sent away to a high school off the reservation, so my daily interaction with my brother became limited. At 8 years old, my brother began to experiment with smokeless tobacco and cigarettes. In high school, on his bus rides home, he dipped and smoked every chance he got. The human brain does not completely develop until age 26, and the front part of the brain that controls behavior and decision-making is being primed by nicotine for other drugs. If my family had known this, we would have done more to intervene. Today, I am helping others by being an advocate for our Native youth. As a Navajo woman trained in medicine and public health, I believe in preserving our culture, traditions, and values by protecting our strongest assets, our children. My brother is 40 years old now and is addicted to tobacco, alcohol, marijuana, and other drugs. Of all the drugs, he said that smoking and smokeless tobacco are the most difficult to quit. Yet Navajo leaders often tell me smoking and smokeless tobacco is not a problem for our communities, and we do not need another law to dictate our behavior. When I hear that, all I think about is my brother laying in my arms, asking for help. Our leaders have a sacred responsibility to protect our people, especially our children. Sovereignty has given us the power to make decisions for our people, and those decisions must be based on knowledge, wisdom, and understanding. We cannot have healthy nations if our people are being exposed to countless tobacco products and layers of secondhand smoke in every new generation. How much of our community's health are we willing to trade in order to increase our economic wealth? Like our ancestors before us, through Kwajong, we must create a life that is holistic for everyone, especially our children.
So this is just an introduction of who I am as a woman, as a Navajo woman. I was born and raised on the Navajo Nation, and John said went through the rigors of medical school at Yale. And at one point in my career, actually, in my path, I realized medicine was probably not the place for me and had to figure out which road I wanted to take. And I knew that I wanted to work with tribes and our tribal communities, and took up the task of jumping into something that I was not familiar with, but realized just how exciting it is the work that we do in tobacco control. And today I'm just going to kind of just give you an overview about what is happening with Indian country as we talk about tobacco control. And this is just something that we created. The medicine wheel is a concept or an image that is used throughout Indian country. Primarily among tribes in the northern plains. They use it to symbolize wholeness, or in the Navajo language, we say Kwajong. It's that balance that is created where everything is in balance with one another, all the forces. But what has happened over the years is that commercial tobacco, when I say commercial tobacco, I'm saying it to make a difference between that and ceremonial tobacco. Ceremonial tobacco includes like the little plants that our traditional healers use that have nicotine in it, but they're nicotina plants that are about that small, not these big leaves that the industry grows in North Carolina. They're very tiny, or red willow bark, sage, cedar. These are all part of what we consider tobacco, and it's used in ceremonies. But over the years, though, we began to replace that. So now when you go into Indian country, when a baby is born, in many cases, smoke is blown into their faces, cigarette smoke. And it's just basically to provide it's like a prayer for them, for a prayer for their mother or father, whoever the caretaker is, to blow smoke in them, and that goes up into the Creator or goes into the universe to bless this child. Then you go into a powwow scene, and you're asked to judge. For example, they'll say, Dr. Henderson, would you like to be a judge with a jingle dress, category? And I'm like, sure. And the first thing they give me is a cigarette to say thank you for being a judge. Well, they did that to me one time, and I'm looking at it, grabbed it, and my husband's like, don't you dare, Patricia. And I'm like, but my kids are there. So I came over here, and I just gently, tossed it on the ground and smudged it. So there's that conflict, even as a physician, going into our own communities, and how do we deal with this cigarette that's given to you as a gift? And then into our ceremonies. Many tribes throughout Indian country now, when you go to, like for Sundance, for example, 4 days of fasting, intense ceremony for many tribes. The way for them to keep awake is through cigarette smoking. So, it's so much a part of the culture. And then when you go to a wake, cigarette smoking is there. They'll have baskets and baskets full of cigarettes. And anybody, regardless of age, can go there and pick up a pack of cigarettes. So how did we get to this point in Indian country? Why is it such a big part of our culture? Well, let me take you on this journey about policies in Indian country. Between 1776 to 1820s, the relationship that the federal government had with the tribes at that time was actually a really good relationship to some degree. The tribes, the federal government saw them as a nation, and there was sort of this sovereign relationship going on that was trying to be established. But what has happened, though, in 1830 was, and between probably 1820 to 1840 was, the government realized that the tribes could not be controlled. So they began to place policies that would impact the tribes, and what we know as the Indian Removal Act of 1830s. This is when the federal government came in and really told the tribes in the eastern part of the United States, let's move you to where other Indians live. So the Trail of Tears, for many of you probably know this history, they removed Cherokee Nation, Choctaw, Seminoles, all the way from the East Coast into what is now Indian country, like in Oklahoma. My family actually participated in the Long Walk. The Long Walk is when the Navajo tribes, probably about 10,000 Navajo people, were forcibly relocated to a fort in New Mexico on foot. So my great-great-grandmother was a part of this. And then it continues on into 1880s. The Dawes Act is basically an act that was passed to civilize tribes by setting up sort of like reservations. And the intent was basically to have the tribes settle down, get them into a place where the federal government could have control. And at that time in the 1880s, what they call civilization regulation outlawed all Indian tribes not to practice their religion or their healing practices. So as you can imagine, if you go into an Indian country, you sit with a traditional healer. Some of the first paraphernalia they take out is tobacco. Well, the hypothesis is that from 1880 to 1978, tribes were not allowed to use any form of tobacco openly. So a lot of tribes began to go underground, began to practice these things. So the story that I hear from my family is that on Navajo Nation, that when this scout that worked for the federal government started coming in, they hid everything. And they just lit up cigarettes to make it look like they were just kind of casually hanging out. So a lot of us in Indian country that are doing work in tobacco control, we believe that a lot of what is happening to ceremonies is because of the acts that were passed by the federal government. And then it continues all the way from 1830s all the way into 1960s when the federal government did everything they could to undermine what the tribes were as a people, as individuals, as communities. Poverty became huge, it became a huge, huge issue because the federal government wanted the tribes to be dependent on the federal government. So any economic development that you could think of was taken away from them. And it wasn't until President Kennedy came on board and said, okay, let's do something. This is not right. Let the federal government's really taken a really beating on the native communities, and let's begin to work with them. And that's when, over the past 30 years, economic development has finally come onto the nation through gaming. As many of you know, you just go out, drive on the freeway, and you'll see that it's like a huge boost for the economy of the Indian people is this gaming. And a lot of tribes, unfortunately, are going that right with the tobacco industry, being involved in it. And I'll show you the link between those two. But before I do that, I just want to kind of just have you think about that and how does this impact me as a researcher? You know, why is this important? Why is the history important? And with, you know, the Black Hills Center for American Indian Health, a nonprofit that my husband started 15 years ago now, he wanted to set it up so that we could invite not only tribes, but other researchers like Tom and Claridina and others to come together with tribes and begin to explore why tobacco products, commercial tobacco products, has such an influence on our Indian community. And right now we have several projects that are ongoing, and just the work that we're doing with, for example, some of the Northern Plains tribes. For the first time, we're exploring what is happening at the cellular level when it comes to nicotine dependence, and the results from that study should be published probably in the next 6 months. But it is amazing. I can't disclose anything without tribal approval. But it's for the first time we're looking at something at this level, because we're seeing that topography of smoking among American Indian is actually very different from general population. And we saw this like 14 years ago when we first did the pilot study, and now we're finally following up on it and really understanding what exactly is happening. I'm like, so that makes sense that we couldn't start a native smoker at 21 milligrams of patch. You know, we got to cut them back down to 14 because they're responding differently to nicotine. And these are just other projects, and the one that I wanted to focus a little bit more on is this one, and this is the one Tom is involved with. This is the Networks Among Tribal Organizations for Clean Air Policy. It's an NCI-funded project that we're doing with Mayo Clinic, and with Tom being one of the consultant on this project. And how this study started, and these are our colleagues getting IRB approval, woohoo! Is what we're wanting to understand is what exactly is happening in Indian country or in Navajo Nation when it comes to networks. For the past X amount of years, probably since 2008, Navajo Nation has been trying to pass policies when it comes to smoke-free environment through a coalition called Team Navajo. And Dr. Elisha is like, God, this sounds like a network. Let's explore it. So out of that, we got this beautiful grant, and it's just blossomed into this amazing thing that I can't share too much of the data that we've had because we're still in the process of analyzing, but it's just been the most significant contribution from the community to have this really move forward. But the thing that is really unique about the work that we're doing in Indian country is the people that we work with. And in this picture right here, and I'll just highlight a couple of folks here, we have a former tribal leader in this project. And it really shows the role that the tribal leader has, the role that tribal healers have. And I think that's something that we've done very differently from other projects is when you go into Indian country, you know, and for example, I'll just use like African American actually, when you go in there, a lot of the people use churches, right? You use churches to get to the core of who the leaderships are and how do you work with this community. For ours, we use traditional healers, and we use traditional healers because we believe that they have such a hold on the community at many, many different levels. They understand the process in which policies are passed. They understand the process in which communities can make decisions on their own. So we got them very much involved over the past several years. What I did as I'm trying to understand what is happening with the NADOCAP with Team Navajo, trying to understand what is happening with the Lakota people when it comes to tobacco control. It's like all these tribes, I'm like, gosh, how did this all happen? Where, you know, other than the policies that were put in place by the federal government, how did the industry become such a vital force in Native communities? So what we did is we looked at the tobacco documents, tobacco industry documents, and looking at keywords, for example, tobacco, Philip Morris, Southwest, Arizona, New Mexico. We wanted to know what they did so that to the point where now we have over 150 retailers, tobacco retailers on Navajo Nation. Like, how did they go from 0 to that level? And the things that really jumped out for us as we did this analysis was that they really exploited on tribal gaming. They understood exactly what needs to happen for tribes to become a tribally owned gaming industry, a gaming enterprise. And then, of course, the sponsorship, and then, of course, using native images. And these are just some of the things that we did. So this is basically, when I got those themes going, I went back to the nation, and I asked the Navajo Nation, I was like, okay, so how does the tobacco industry, where do they come in when it comes to your culture? Where do they come in when it comes to your values and your traditions? How does the industry play a part as we're moving forward? And these are just some of the images that they did. This actually on top is a beaded piece, all beaded. And the one that really hit home for me was actually the one in the far left. It's a medicine wheel on fire. And this is a fifth grade student that did that. And it just like, okay, this is where, you know, this is really hitting home now. This is like really the essence of who we are as Native people, to have something on fire. It's just like, I guess, in Christianity to light up, like, for example, like a cross. It's very symbolic, and I started getting very upset, very emotional because of what was happening. So this is from the industry, and we just got this, and we started going through all the documents that were out there. And the thing that the industry understands very, very well is the sovereign status of Native people. And they understood that the state has very limited role in many cases when it comes to gaming. That changed over the years because of the compacts that the states are now having with tribes. They realized they can set up shop and begin to pass products through that way. I'll just use one example. Navajo Nation, we just built 4 casinos. The biggest casino actually is this beautiful enterprise, a beautiful building that they have. And you walk in and literally, it's just right today, it's just a small little case with probably 4 different brands of tobacco products. This casino just opened about 1.5 years ago. If I should go back in 2 years, 3 years, I predict that's going to be even a bigger size. So as we were passing policies through trying to pass policies through Navajo Nation, like I said, we did five attempts so far now. The first attempt went really, really well. The tribe understood it. They're like, we get this. We're going to move forward. We see that secondhand smoke exposure is bad for us. Let's pass the bill. There was no question asked about exemption, nothing. It came before the Navajo Nation president, and before he was going to sign this into law, the Navajo Nation's premier newspaper, the Navajo Times, had this published, basically saying smoking ban prompts 40% cut in jobs at the casino. The casino hadn't even opened. They're still building. And they put this out in the papers. I'm like, you're joking. And of course, you know, this is the same information the industry shared with restaurants and bars, right? And we show like this document, and I told the president, I'm like, you can't listen to these folks. And we were sitting in that room trying to convince the president of the Navajo Nation to sign this law. And he ended up vetoing it for many different, he lists for a reason. The primary reason was because of gaming. And then this one just basically, the industry documents just shows that, for us to have a competitive edge, we need to really highlight the words native, the images of native products, right? As we all know, when you go into now any tobacco, retail place, you'll see these images of Red Man and whoever, on these products. But what we're dealing here in Indian country, and for those that are focusing on in tobacco control in Native communities, is these products. Can someone tell me where these products are coming from? I'll just, the tribes.
New York State.
Yeah, these are tobacco products that are being produced by our own Indian people.
And even advertising in Spanish.
Yeah. So these products are not only being marketed here in the U.S., but it's going to Mexico, it's going to Germany, and we just finished a wiki site where we're going to be featuring these products and really highlighting where these products are being marketed. And that's a question that we had today, is like, how is this happening? How are the tribes able to market these products to other tribes and bypassing state laws as they're doing this?
Who's making the profits then on this?
The tribal, it's not the tribe, it's the tribal person. So it's one tribal person, maybe two, that own these products. So but it's under the sovereign status. They fall under the sovereign status so that they're covered by the sovereignty of the tribe so that they can do these things.
Do they share the profits with other members, or so?
Just one soul, they keep the monies for themselves, as we're finding out.
What's the relationship between sales or any revenue derived for tobacco versus gaming casinos? Is there a formal link between anyone organizing casinos and?
We have no idea. You mean just in terms of the sale or the?
Sales, cross-marketing?
That has yet to be explored. It is a totally, this whole thing has just, John and I, when we were on TIPSAC, we're like, okay, who are these people? What are they doing? How are they getting the money? And it's just a new area for us, because at one point, prior to these products getting out in the market, I used to say, the tobacco industry is the enemy. They're the ones that we can't say that now, because these are our own tribal members using sovereign status to push products through into our communities.
Do you also have any information about whether or not any revenues from this are going back into the tribes?
We have no idea.
And I would assume that some of them are just contracting with various places to sell these products, because, for instance, the Seminole, when I was in Florida, they had on their front page of their local newspaper that they had the e-cig and from the Seminole that they created. So we were on the reservation. So we were stopping at every store because I wanted to bring it back and show our team.
Mm-hmm.
But I couldn't find it. I went to every gas station, little local store, but they didn't have it. They said, no, you can find it out in the city, wherever they're contracting with.
Right.
So, I thought it was a good thing that they weren't selling it on the tribe. But.
Well, we have no knowledge about their marketing strategies. We have no knowledge about their sales. We have no knowledge about who is involved. Where are they getting their tobacco from? Their leaves, because that's going to be regulated by the industry now, by FDA. We have no idea. So it's a whole new market, and
Are these regulated in any way by the FDA?
They should be.
But they're not.
They're yeah. So there's a site, there's this gentleman that has an MBA, he's American Indian, and what he does is he goes through from one nation to from one community to another community throughout Indian country, basically telling folks, you can make money. If you're a tribal member of this tribe, you are covered by the sovereign status of the tribe, and you can produce these products. We'll help you produce them. We'll get it out in the market for you. We'll help you understand all the regulations that you're going to have to go, even maybe bypass some of these regulations. So this gentleman has come on to Navajo Nation multiple times, and I got a little anxious, so I ended up trademarking the Navajo tobacco word. Like, if you go onto the website, onto the federal trademark, Navajo Tobacco is now owned by our company. They can't use the word Navajo to produce products, so we were a little proactive in that way. But it's a whole new area of research.
And just
There's factories, right?
same question.
I'm sorry?
Yeah, this question about the location of the factories that are producing the tobacco and doing the packaging and all that, so we're trying to...
It's all in Indian country.
So then you would, don't the tobacco industry, sometimes they try to keep these things very secret, right? And make it very hard, and John was mentioning, but for the Indian on the sovereign land, you know where these factories are, right? Or...
I have not been able to locate them. I have no idea where they are, actually. I have no idea.
But they have to be on tribal lands,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
So there's limited area that they could be, right?
Right.
You think
So-
that's staging
so-
a protest?
So it's just I guess it's one thing to know where it is, but it's another thing to just go up to this place and say, let's see your products. Where are you getting your leaves from? This is a whole new area for us in the tobacco advocacy world, is just educating tribes now. It's like, don't go down this alley. This is not where you want to be. Let's do something else other than producing products that are actually harmful. And the Sovereign, this is a story that's really kind of funny for me, because Sovereign Tobacco Products was actually owned by a different company, and they decided to sell it. And the one tribe that decided to buy it was the Mohawk tribe. So I'm sitting in a plane. This is several years ago. The day after they purchased it, actually, I was sitting on a plane. This burly guy, like, he was sitting next to me. He kept falling asleep, right? And then he finally wakes up and we started chatting. And he's like, "So what do you do?" And I said, "Well, I do work in tobacco control." And I said, "What do you do?" And he's like, I'm one of the council on the for the Mohawk Nation." And I grabbed his hand and I slapped it. I was like, "Why did you buy that company?" Then he's like, "Dr. Henderson, somebody had to buy it, or we had to purchase it, or somebody else would have done it anyway." So now I have this relationship with this gentleman, and he's invited me to go to New York to sit down with them and really figure out better ways to bring economic development into the nation other than these cigarette products. So yeah, it's very interesting. This is what we're doing with one of our projects, and hopefully in a couple years, maybe a year, hopefully we'll come back and share some of the results with you, because we're now going, hopefully in the next 6 months, going into tobacco retail shops throughout three sites, right? And getting some data, and hopefully for the first time sharing with you whether or not these tribal retailer shops are in compliance with the FDA.
The question on ignorance is, I've heard a lot about the gaming industry. What other kind of industries do the American Indian nations, the different tribes have? I mean, obviously it looks like there's tobacco, but what other kinds of products are produced in a factory-like fashion?
Well, if you look at the timeline that I showed you, when the federal government was placing tribes onto creation of reservations, they put them in the places where things cannot grow. For example, Pine Ridge. How many of you have been to Pine Ridge Reservation in South Dakota? Pine Ridge, if you look at the data dating back 40 years ago, the census data, unfortunately Pine Ridge, it has like 3 counties. The 3 counties are the poorest counties in America over the past, number 1, 3, and 4, and I think 5. They're the poorest counties in America. poverty is just so in your face when you get into these communities and in any other tribal communities. And what has happened is a lot of people think that tribes are making money from casinos. It's like a very, very small percentage of these tribes that have gaming that are doing a very, very good job and doing a successful job in putting money back into the communities. For Navajo Nation is the largest tribe. We have uranium, but of course there's a moratorium on uranium mining. We had coal. So we basically exploited all of Mother Earth, and now, we're sitting here trying to figure out what can we produce that other people can really gravitate towards. So the economic development end of it is really I think, a challenge for us when it comes to producing products that can go worldwide and be shared with others. I know that some of the tribes here are actually getting into the wine industry, so they're planting vineyards and, as you smile, I'm not sure how their products are, but yeah. So when you look at tobacco industry, so you have all these things that are happening in Indian country right now, as I've shown you, and what has been done and what hasn't been done. And we know that it's very, very difficult to work in this field. There's lack of funds, lack of tribal specific data. The approaches that we're taking have been very different over the years, and have they been effective? No. And I'll share a little bit more about that, and of course now the role of the industry. So in Navajo, and this is just my perspective, not Navajo Nation's perspective, but we're dealing with something that is just really has basically become a big issue. The role of commercial tobacco products in our ceremonies. And that's where I feel, as a Native person, that's where we need to focus our efforts on. And I say this because when I went to the traditional healers to get approval for our first project, it was a CDC project, I asked them, how many of you smoke or use commercial tobacco products in your ceremonies? And this is like a room of 100 healers. About 80% of them raised their hand. They're like, yeah, we use it. I nearly fell over in my chair. I'm like, you're joking. I thought this was only something that was happening with the healers up in South Dakota, and that wasn't the case. So what we did on Navajo is basically through the efforts of our CDC, through funding from CDC, we started to just bring everybody we know onto this coalition. And this, I'm not sure if you know this person, but for those of you who are involved in tobacco control, do you know Dr. Leland Fairbanks? He's he calls himself the old white doctor. And he basically was really instrumental in having some of the first hospital in the world to go smoke-free is in Kings Canyon on the Hopi Nation, and he was responsible for it. So he came onto Team Navajo and began to help educate our traditional healers, really a big focus on our children, and then began to help us create messages that are appropriate for our community. When the coalition first started, they used the word Belagana Benato. Belagana Benato Baat Ekwelo, Belito Baat Ekwelo means, if I were to translate it word by word, white man's tobacco hurts the inner essence of who you are and everything around you. So that's how the coalition said, this is a white man's issue. They brought the tobacco products onto our nation, and that's what's hurting us. Well, you can see now Belagana is scratched out, because just less than probably 2 months ago in a room like this, where we had the advisory board coming together, they said, this is not just a white man's issue. These products are not just coming from the white people. These products are coming from China, they're coming from Mexico, they're coming from India. So we cannot call this product that is deadly Belagana, white people, no more. So they came up with the word Ana, And there was a huge discussion just on this word, ana. Ana means the enemy. The enemy's tobacco. So that we recoined this word just 2 months ago, and we're really excited about it. But then there's this one gentleman that's sitting in the audience, and he's a former code talker for the Navajo Nation. And he said, you know, when you say ana in a community, little kids are not going to understand that. They're going to say, oh, it's an enemy's product. Let me try it. He's like, you need to give it the right name. Nat o pahat zidi, meaning the tobacco that will kill. The tobacco that is harmful. So what we're going to do over the probably next year is really begin to do a lot more work in this area so that we come up with words not only for tobacco products, but for e-cigarettes, for hookahs, for snus, anything, any emerging products that are coming out. We'll be doing that with our little group, coining words that will be appropriate for the tribe. So we're really excited what has happened with the efforts, with our CDC efforts with this, and in combination with our NCI grant, and trying to think of questions like, okay, where do we go from here now? So these are just the individuals. As you can see, this is our advisory group. Very elderly, you know, these are all these individuals. All the men are traditional healers. And these are their wives. And what we were told from the board is like, if you're going to invite us men to be a part of your advisory group, we're going to have to bring our wives, because we get support from them. And we're like, okay, that means that's going to affect our budget. We're like, okay, it looks like we're just going to have to double our budget when it comes to the advisory board. And Scott Lisha was like, sure, let's do it, you know. And the unique thing, what they told us was, you know what, if you really want this research project to take on this next level of knowledge that we're wanting to share with you, you need to do something for us. And we're like, sure. He's like, you need to sit down in a hogan with us and have a ceremony. So after going through all this process of IRB approval, which Dr. Lisha nearly left us right in the middle of it because it was so intense and tearful, and it was just the most grilling process I've ever gone through, we sat in a hogan with these gentlemen and smoked zichnat'o, is natural tobacco, for 2 hours in this beautiful room. It was dark, no electricity. All you hear are dogs barking in the background. And for 2 hours, just having that time for the traditional healers to say, you know what, you guys can now move forward with your project. Let's move forward. So this happened 6 months, about a year ago. Next month, they're going to actually be coming to Mayo Clinic or on the sites, and we're going to have another ceremony, and that's going to be the blessing ceremony. That's the final ceremony where they've taken the energy, the bad energy, now they're going to replace it with good energy. So that's 2 ceremonies that we're going to be doing with the traditional healers for our NAUTOCAT study. And you've seen this gentleman before in a lot of the efforts. You've heard of him. He actually came down to Navajo Nation and spoke to the Gaming Enterprise Board. He brought all his medicine, you know, all the medication, 28 medications that he was on. He brought his breathing machine, and then he sat in front of the board just like this, and he told the board, I am like this because I've been exposed to secondhand smoke while I worked in a casino. And this one Navajo woman in the back, you know, she said something in Navajo, and I said to her, my mother, I said, we're doing this. He's here because he loves us. We're here because we love you and we love our people. And then she said to me, Dr. Henderson, I really don't care about what you're saying about love. This is about money. And I'm like, oh, goodness gracious. So he came out and just advocated until he passed away. As you know, probably 7 months ago he died. And we're trying to carry on his message with Navajo Nation, with other tribes, that, you know, we don't want any more stories like Nathan's. And the efforts with the CDC grant, and what we're doing is we're going into the communities. We had our first, 4 years ago, our first tobacco-free rodeo, tobacco-free gathering sites, small ceremonial sites that were commercial tobacco-free. We got on radios, we did the art contest, and really trying to understand what is happening in our communities when it comes to tobacco control. And this is the policy that we really pushed forward the last several years, is that we're wanting to go all commercial tobacco free, so we're not dealing with any type of loopholes like what the states are having to deal with in many municipalities here in the US is the hookahs, the e-cigs. Let's just take care of it. And the tribe is okay with that. But the things that we're not regulating, as you know, is the ceremonial use, private use, and then private vehicles with just adults. We're really focusing on private vehicles with children, and that's a part of the policy that we've introduced. And for many of you who done work in Indian country, or particularly on Navajo Nation, it's just really understanding what hoops and fences you need to jump over. And on Navajo, sheep is a very, very important part of our culture, so we use the sheep as an analogy to the legislation and what happens. We totally understand this process now after going through it in 2008, 2009, and then when the new president came in, we did it in 2011. His attorney general actually said that the president of the Navajo Nation has no authority to introduce an executive order, and the attorney general did not sign it. So in 2008, that legislation passed, but was vetoed by the president. In 2009, we killed that bill on the floor because we had 6 amendments coming from 6 different committees to exempt gaming. And we were told that it was going to take about 17 years to reintroduce another legislation that would include gaming. So we just strategically killed it on the floor. And I was sitting at the front of the council, and the agent, or I was the agent, and the council delegate said to me, Dr. Henderson, do not say a word. It's like, you keep your mouth shut. So I sat there, didn't say anything, and he strategically did what he needed to do so that bill was killed on the floor. And then so these are just some of the ads that the gaming industry did, say finding the right balance, a sensible approach to smoking banning issue. The proposal in front of the leaders represents a sensible approach to balancing economic interests of the Navajo Nation while also protecting the members of the Navajo Nation from harmful impacts of secondhand smoke. That is a quote from the gaming industry on the Navajo Nation. So we went back to back because what they did was they introduced their own legislation, the gaming industry, using all the language that we had used in previous legislation, and they just tweaked it a little bit, saying that the only thing that they were going to exempt was gaming. As we started going through the legislation, we found out that they're also exempting hotels, sports arenas. I'm like, this doesn't make sense. It passed by the tribe. The tribal council passed it. We then went back to the Navajo Nation, and to the Navajo Nation president, and we told him to veto it. It's like, you cannot sign this. Please veto it. And he listened to us, and we were able to defeat that bill in 2011. That's when after this, that's when we got the grant for our project. And the thing that I ran across really quickly was, when we went before the IRB board, they're like, why are you studying yourself, Dr. Henderson? Aren't you part of Team Navajo? I'm like, so I literally had to physically sign a paper telling the IRB that I was no longer going to be an advocate, that I'm relinquishing my role as of this date, that everything that I've done up to this point was going to be put on hold while I looked at the network of the Team Navajo now. So I'm kind of now looking into it, and I get so frustrated, especially when the analyses are coming back. I'm like, gosh, I wish I just could jump back in and help out, but maybe when the grant ends in a couple of years, I'll be back in the motion with them. So this is what happened. Introducing, it's not working, but then we went back to our own tribal leaders, our own tribal traditional healers, really getting into the ceremonies, working closely with them. In February of this year, the first time ever in Indian country, they passed a very comprehensive policy where they are not going to be using smokeless, or they will not be using commercial tobacco products in their ceremonies on Navajo Nation. So this is huge. It's impacting like over 90,000 people on the nation, and we're just really, really excited. And I told the crew, I said, you know, how do we duplicate this now? You know, how do we make it so that now the kivas on the Pueblo nations are tobacco free, or the sun dances in the Sioux community are tobacco free? So it's going to be a challenge, but I think it can be done. I think we really have a good process in place for that we can duplicate this, and I'm really excited about this part.
Is it clear that this most recent resolution and the term commercial includes the types of products that you said are being sold under the auspices of the tribes?
Right.
Is it very clear that commercial includes these products?
Absolutely. So how they defined it in a lot of the other, as another part of this legislation, is they define what can be used. So they said zilmatlo, meaning mountain smoke. So that's how they defined it. And so these products that are coming from Indian tribes are not, those will all be prohibited, absolutely. And then just a couple months ago, the president then decided, he's like, well, my AG is telling me that I'm not in charge, so what am I going to do? So what he did was, he, with the help of Team NAPO, reintroduced another legislation, another executive order. The only thing that is different about this executive order from the previous one is it does not include gaming and other public places on the reservation, but it includes all public places where tribes work, tribal members work, like in the executive branch. So these are chapter houses, so it covers that. So I think movement is happening. We're just excited. The other stuff that we're doing with the tribe is taxation. This is the one the tribe gets really excited about because they know money's coming into them. So we work really closely with the American Campaign Tobacco Free Kids. They did analysis for us, like how they've done for states, and showed them the numbers. It's like, this is what's going to happen. Let's do this. And the Navajo Nation, for those that are not familiar, it basically occupies a fourth of the state of Arizona. We also are in New Mexico and Utah, and the laws for all these in terms of taxation is very different from each other, right? Utah is like 69%, and Arizona $22, and New Mexico is $1.66. And then right in the middle of the Navajo Nation is the Hopi Nation. They have no taxes on their tobacco products. So what we told the nation was just increase it, let's work with the state, and just a couple, 3 years ago, they've increased it to 60 cents. And what we're doing that for them is we're getting the data back to them. You're saying to them, okay, the numbers are dropping, from 2000 to 2011, and then the data is going to be collected in 2014 again to 10,000 youth across Navajo Nation. So the data is very rich, it's cross-sectional, and we're moving forward, and the numbers continue to drop, but this is ever tried, so the numbers are still high compared to the general population, but this is what the leadership is seeing. They're like, you know what, Dr. Anderson, let's try to pass another taxation law to increase taxes. And I'm like, yay! And I was like, what you need to do is also restructure the taxation on smokeless tobacco products, because they're now on weight base, not unit base. So because they're on weight base, it doesn't adjust for inflation, and basically the products of smokeless tobacco products are still very cheap on Navajo Nation compared to cigarettes. So they're going to be introducing a legislation that will change the language so that it's taxed differently.
Are these rates including youth, regardless if they live on tribal lands or not?
This is for Navajo Nation. This is Navajo data. So these are all kids that attend. I think 98% of these children are Navajo. The other two, probably is even less than that, less than 1% are non-Navajo. And they all live on Navajo Nation.
Can you say something? The data I used to know, and I don't know, I heard that on the prevalence in adults of smoking.
I'm sorry?
Prevalence in adults.
Oh, the younger adults have about 38% smoking.
So it used to be very low. So
That's a big
and
increase. Women is about 18%.
So the men, it's substantial.
Mm-hmm. So it's increasing, and what we're wanting to do is write another grant actually to look at pre and post. You know how some of the studies where they've looked at pre and post when a smoke-free policy is introduced, right? And looking at the numbers of decrease in heart attacks. We're wanting to do that. Wanting to see if there's going to be actually an increase now in heart attacks and and respiratory illnesses among the Navajo Nation. For those clinics where there's casinos, basically. So I think right now, I mean, we're at a point now, I'm not sure if you guys listen to the news, but Navajo Nation is still trying to elect a president. It's been a little bit of a challenge. The person that they select, that the nation picked actually, was this young gentleman, a former officer of the I think it's the Naval Academy, and a lawyer, just like the ideal candidate to be the president of the Navajo Nation. He got second place in the primary election, and he was challenged by another candidate because he did not speak the Navajo language. So, yep, and our Constitution, actually, it says that any person that runs for the Navajo Nation office has to speak and understand the language. And he did not speak it that well, so he ended up getting ousted. So now we're trying to figure out who's going to be our president. But I think leadership is so important, getting people in there that will be your advocate. You know, I just praise my president. You know, I don't talk bad about him. He's done such a phenomenal job. He signed into law just 2 weeks ago the creation of the first health department on Navajo Nation. So under that umbrella, we'll hopefully be doing a lot of the enforcement that is necessary with the FDA, with all other issues as it relates to tobacco control. We helped him set up a wellness plan for the first time for the nation, and then he passed policies to help Navajo Nation. He just 2 weeks ago passed a law that will put taxes on junk food on Navajo Nation. So a true advocate, and I think we're really, and this gentleman right here is his vice president, Dr. Rexley Jim. He's a traditional healer by training, and he was one of the first traditional healers to have his ceremonies go smoke-free, tobacco-free. So, let's see. So for future projects, you know, we're doing the work here with you when it comes to point of purchase on Indian country. And then what we're trying to do, and we've started collaborating with other nations, other indigenous peoples throughout the world actually. We have very close ties to folks in Ecuador. The Quechuan people are very, very similar as Navajo Nation. The thing that is very similar with us as we are to them is they use commercial tobacco products in their ceremonies. So we're trying to get grants for that, to explore how we can work with this nation, work with these communities in Ecuador and making policy changes for them, because it's just very similar to what is happening here, that the laws that are passed at Quito, for example, doesn't necessarily get down into the communities. But the thing that is unique for them is they don't have sovereign status like we do. You know, they're just very isolated, but they're willing to work with us. And then the other one is really addressing this issue about the role of commercial tobacco products in this life cycle. from birth all the way to death. How do we begin to change the frame, the mindset, not of just traditional healers, but of youth, of people that are out there. And I think that's going to be a challenge for us, but I think anything is possible, and we're just really looking forward to the work that we've started, the work that needs to be done. I think personally, I love the advocacy side. If I could just stay there, I would love it, but I think, Indian country actually needs researchers like Claridina and I that can really bridge what the science is doing with the culture and the messaging that we're going to have to relay so that they understand what we're doing. So I'm really excited about this process and look forward to any questions that you might have.
I have a question. I think it's a huge step, given what you've gone through, to pull out or restrict against commercial tobacco use. Can you see in the future at any point getting even more restrictive and going back to what the original culture's use of tobacco was for, which was ceremonial use and not other recreational use? Has there been any discussion of that, and is there any support for getting to that even more restrictive step?
Absolutely. There is, with the Lakota people in Pine Ridge, I'll just use Pine Ridge as an example, they probably have over, I want to say about 100 some dances during the summer. So these are 4 intense days of ceremonies. One gentleman, with just the work that we've been doing with this tribe, decided, after he realized just how deadly these products are, his whole camp is now commercial tobacco free. Out of the 100, there's 1 now. So we're really excited about that, and he's taking his message back to his own community. So even the buildings that his followers work in, they're all commercial tobacco free. So I think it is doable. I think, but it's starting at that level and then working its way out. I think that's what we want to do, and I think at some point doing some social network analyses on that would be awesome, Tom. Just kind of exploring how does that message being filtered out to the rest of these groups across the nation, and what this young gentleman did in Pine Ridge versus what the Navajo Nation did with passing this very comprehensive commercial tobacco-free act or resolution with their ceremonies.
Say a little bit about, sort of the general issue of prevention of non-communicable diseases and how you're tying tobacco in, and of course obesity, diabetes are already terrible problems in the American Indians and only going in the wrong direction. So this has been tobacco, and I know there are a lot of people working on obesity and diabetes, but can you say a little bit more about sort of broader and general strategies towards?
Absolutely. This is where the state has really helped us out, the state of Arizona and New Mexico, not so much Utah, but they've really wanted to bridge smoking with comorbid diseases, including diabetes. And so all the messaging that we do on the air is actually the link between diabetes, or not the link, the complications of having diabetes and having exposure to secondhand smoke. So that's the message we're carrying out. The other thing that we're really careful, and this is probably something that I really want to explore this, is the message of keeping it sacred, keep it sacred versus commercial tobacco kills. What we've done with our efforts is we've totally stayed away from the message of keep it sacred and really focus on the dangers of secondhand smoke of this product that is not good. When we got into this small circle, when we recoined that word, the traditional healers said to us, you're only doing the bad side, the negative side. You now need to do the positive side, the sake that tobacco is sacred. So they're like, there's this balance that you walk in when you're on Navajo. It's like you do the good and then you do the bad. You just don't do one side. So I think that's something that as a researcher, is going to have to deal with and kind of figure out what messaging does work with Indian country.
Right. I feel like that's exactly what's happening though, because if you now have these commercial-free, ceremonies, but you're still using natural tobacco or sage, or other medicinal plants for these things, it's still, you're keeping that sacred, you're keeping that ceremony sacred, so it is still, nurturing that message.
Right.
Where it would, I think, would make more sense now.
To
Because
have,
Right, because they have that distinction, because that's where it becomes really difficult when you're using these commercial tobacco cigarettes for these ceremonies. And then you have the kids picking it up in a totally different context and saying it's okay because we use it in a ceremonial way. It's okay for me to use this cigarette in this out of context when it's not. So these messages actually could become a little bit more clear.
so we have a store in Rapid City, and they sell multiple things. It's like a trading post, and then they have this amazing art gallery that's next to it that sell native art. And they sell different forms of tobacco, and I was packing this, and my son said to me, "Mommy, aren't you going to get arrested if you take this home?" I was like, honey, this is cedar, baby. It's like, maybe prior to 1978, I would have gotten arrested, but now I can carry this with me. So, John, I wanted to give you this. It's just cedar. Yeah, so it's very significant. And,
We will say this was TCORS. TCORS purposes. Thank you. So I think, thanks so much for a great presentation. I think anybody who wants to talk to Patricia individually, she'll be here with us today, and she'll be at the department holiday party. It starts at 3 and it's not outside. We'll have to chat over dinner about the conflict between scientists and advocates.
oh, yeah.
Roles. I mean, it's a very complicated.
It is.
But you're clearly, you're perhaps the most conflicted person I've heard talk about this. And you can't sort of put on one hat and then say, okay,
Yeah,
now I'm
it
the
is
other
hard.
person.
It's a huge challenge.
Yeah.
I would be very interested in that. I think it'd be a way to show how we are.
Well, they have something.
Okay, that'd be great.
Let me know the name of it.
Oh, that's the name of it. Dr. Henderson, thank you so much. Thank you for your talk and your journey, and I have a special love and appreciation for the Navajo people. So, I know it sounds like a real blanket statement, but it's here and it's through experience and travel. So,
Thank you so much.
you've been very inspired over the years. Yeah, you can see that. Yeah, I can see that.
Gratitude.